You smell it before you see anything. Cold concrete and wet rubber matting under your boots, stale popcorn, and under all of it, the sharp propane bite of the Zamboni warming up. You're 7. It's 6 in the morning, and it's minus 26 outside. This is the arena. In a town of 1,100 people, it's the whole social life of the place. And right now, half the families you know are on those cold aluminum benches. You know whose car is whose in the lot before you ever see who's driving. These are the signs you grew up in a small Canadian town in the 1980s. Today, almost none of it is still standing, and there's a reason why. Start with Saturday night, because in the 80s, Saturday night had a sound. It was the Hockey Night in Canada theme pouring out of a wood-paneled television, loud enough to hear from 3 houses down. By 1980, a loud man in even louder suits had taken over the first intermission. Don Cherry. Ron McLean joined him in 1986, and for the next 3 decades, those two were a fixture in living rooms across the entire country. You didn't choose to watch Coach's Corner. It was just on, the way weather is just on. But in a small town, you weren't watching alone. Your neighbors had the same broadcast on at the same second, and by Monday, the whole town had seen the same goal. That was the internet, 40 years early. Then there was the store. Not a store, the store. Every small town had one building that quietly did the job of 9 businesses. Groceries, hardware, fishing licenses, a post office wicket in the back, and a bulletin board by the door, where the whole civic life of the town hung in thumbtacked layers. Babysitting, a truck for sale, a snowmobile, barely used, call after 6. There was a coffee can of Canadian Tire money in a kitchen drawer in just about every house in town. Those little bills had been around since 1958, printed by the same company that printed real Canadian currency, which is exactly why a 5-year-old hoarded them like treasure. And once a year, in the fall, something hit the mailbox that stopped childhood cold. The Sears Wish Book. Not the Eaton's catalog, by the way. That one had already run its final edition back in 1976. By the 80s, the Christmas catalog that mattered was Sears. Hundreds of glossy pages, and you and your brother fought over who got it first so you could fold down the corner of every single thing you wanted and were never going to get. Money worked differently when you were small, too. You'd collect empty pop bottles out of the ditch and the garage, haul them to the store in a cardboard box, and trade the deposit for a paper bag of penny candy you chose one piece at a time while the owner waited. Nobody was in a hurry. There was nowhere else to be. In a town that small, privacy didn't really exist, and nobody expected it to. Doors went unlocked. Keys lived in the ignition. Wander too far down the road, and somebody's mother who wasn't your mother would feed you lunch and then phone your actual mother to report on you. Plenty of houses were still on a party line, which meant you shared a phone line with the neighbors. Pick up the receiver at the wrong moment, and you'd catch 2 farmers mid-conversation about the price of cattle. You learned to hang up quietly. Mostly. The whole town ran on a handful of rooms like that. The Legion Hall, the curling rink, the church basement where every funeral, wedding, and Saturday fowl supper played out over the same urns of weak coffee and the same dented metal chairs. Winter ran everything. Every car had a block heater, and every parking spot in town had an electrical outlet on a post, so the lot outside the rink looked like a row of cars on life support, orange cords trailing to the wall. You rode in the way back of the station wagon with no seatbelt, or stood up in the box of your uncle's pickup on a gravel road, and not one adult thought twice about it. And back then, in a way kids today can't really picture, the days actually ended. There were 2 channels, maybe 3, and at some point, past midnight, the broadcast simply stopped. The anthem played over a waving flag. The screen dropped into a test pattern, a card of colored bars with a high electronic tone. And that was that. Television was over. Go to bed. After school, if the timing was right, you caught The Littlest Hobo, a wandering German shepherd named London who turned up in a new small town every week, fixed a stranger's life, refused every offer to be adopted, and trotted off down a dirt road as that theme song played. The CTV run went from 1979 to 1985, which makes it almost the exact soundtrack of an 80s Canadian childhood. A dog who belonged to nobody and helped everybody, then left. That one lands a little differently now than it did when you were 8. And then there was the single greatest piece of audio a Canadian kid could hope to hear. The snow day. You sat on the kitchen floor by the radio, frozen and praying, while a local announcer read the school closures one agonizing district at a time. When he finally said the name of your school, the whole house heard you. But the thing that really told you that you were home wasn't a smell or a sound. It was a shape on the horizon. On the prairies, it was the grain elevator. You could see it from miles out across the flat. A tall wooden tower with the town's name painted down the side in block letters, standing higher than the church and the water tower and everything else around. A lot of towns had a whole row of them. Indian Head, Saskatchewan had 12 at its peak, plus a flour mill. They were the first thing you saw coming home and the last thing you saw leaving. People called them Prairie sentinels. Somewhere else, it was a different shape. A single blinking traffic light. The drive-in screen sitting at the edge of a field. The water tower with the town name on it. The rail line running straight through the middle of everything. Because the railway was the reason most of these towns existed at all. And that's the exact point where this story stops being warm. Before we get into what came next, one quick thing. This channel exists to keep these places on the record. The brands, the towns, the Saturday night rituals that built this country and then quietly vanished. If that matters to you, subscribe. It's how these stories stay alive. Okay, so this is the part where it all comes apart. It didn't happen all at once, which was the cruel part of it. There was no single villain to point at. It arrived as a slow run of perfectly reasonable decisions, each one made far away by people who would never set foot in the place. First, the highway moved. The new road was built to go around the town instead of through it, to save drivers 8 minutes. 8 minutes? But the gas station, the diner, and the motel on the old Main Street had lived entirely on people passing through. Now, nobody passed through. They went around. The young people left too. There was no work, so every spring the graduating class drove off to the city, and most of them never came back. The school got smaller. 2 schools merged into one. Then that school closed, and once the school is gone, a town has started to die in a way that is very hard to reverse. Then came the big box. On January 14th, 1994, Walmart announced it was buying 122 Woolco stores and entering Canada's. It put up enormous stores on cheap land outside the bigger towns and sold everything the Main Street sold for less. So the hardware store closed. Then the clothing store. The pharmacy held on another year before it went too. The family that had run the general store for 40 years locked the door one ordinary Tuesday, and that was the end of it. The old Canadian names started falling as well. Eaton's, the store your grandmother swore by, around since 1869, filed for bankruptcy in 1999 and disappeared. Even the money changed underneath you. The dollar bill you grew up with was swapped for a coin in 1987, and within 2 years, the bill was gone for good. On the prairies, the loss had a sound. It was the sound of the elevators coming down. When the railways tore up the branch lines and the grain moved to a handful of giant concrete terminals, the wooden elevators had no job left to do. So they came down, hundreds upon hundreds of them. The prairies held 5,758 country elevators at the peak in 1933. By the end of 2019, across all 3 provinces, there were 352 left standing. The skyline of the West, the shape that told you that you were nearly home, was simply erased. There's a farmer named Rob Dubik near Rosetown, Saskatchewan. On his land stood an elevator built in 1923, a building 3 generations of his family had worked and shared. By the 2000s, it was rotting and dangerous, and he knew the only real option left was to burn it down. He couldn't do it. He wrote the numbers for the local authorities on a note, set it by the kitchen phone, and then avoided that note for years, watching it yellow until there was finally nothing else to be done. He made the call. Take that one man and that one phone call and multiply it across 1,000 small towns, and that's what the ending actually looked like. Not a dramatic collapse. Just a lot of people quietly letting go of something their grandparents had built. So, when somebody our age goes quiet over an old photo of a grain elevator, or a Sears wish book, or the inside of a freezing arena, it helps to be honest about what's actually gone. You can still buy everything the catalog sold, faster, online. The thing you can't reorder is quieter and harder to name. It's walking into the only store in town, and the woman at the till knowing your name, your mother's name, and what your family bought every single week. It's a whole town seeing the same goal on the same Saturday night. You were a small part of something, and the something knew you were there. That kind of town raised a whole generation. Then, the wider world decided it was inefficient and took it apart, one reasonable decision at a time. The arena, if it's even still standing, is probably quiet now. If you grew up in one of these towns, you already know the smell of that rink. You know the name painted down the elevator. You know which announcer read the snow day list. Share it with someone who lived it. Someone who will feel the same pull at the same parts you did. And subscribe, so these places don't disappear twice. Once in real life was enough.